fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Fulbright Hays Program, the National Endowment for the Humanities twice, and the Charles Warren Center at Harvard. Gould's other publications include The Persistence of Empire, British Political Culture in the Age of the American Revolution, and Empire and Nation, The American Revolution in the Atlantic World, co-edited with Peter Onuf, as well as numerous articles, book chapters, and review essays. We are fortunate to have him with us this evening. Lige, thank you for joining us tonight. It's all yours.
Barbara, thank you very much for that generous invitation. And thank you to Laura Martin, who invited me to give this talk, Exeter TV. I'm sure like everyone, I wish we could be in person. I did give a talk a couple years ago in the Exeter Town Hall, and the energy of talking about these things before a live audience can't be beat. So I'll try to keep the energy up here on Zoom. I'm going to talk, I'm planning to talk for about 40 minutes and then leave time for question and answers. So that if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. And I think Laura is going to be running those. I think you have to be on Zoom or in Facebook to actually ask a question. Anyway. So as the talk title suggests, I want to talk this evening about Alexander Hamilton and the making of the United States. Though Hamilton himself is a fascinating figure, also an oftentimes misunderstood figure. I wouldn't say that historically he's been a much loved figure. He's controversial. Hamilton the musical changed that. I remember when I first saw there was going to be a musical about Alexander Hamilton, like most other historians of the American Revolution, I thought, well, good luck with that. But of course, it's an extraordinary event. If you've seen it, you know what an incredible job Lin-Manuel Miranda did with it. I will say that Hamilton the musical captures parts of Alexander Hamilton's life while obscuring others. We don't have time to talk about all of Hamilton's life, but I want to touch on three aspects of his public life. First, Hamilton, the self-made man, which is, of course, a theme in the musical. Hamilton, the nationalist, and I'll say more about that when I come to that part. And then finally, Hamilton, the partisan. And all of this, if you've seen the musical, will probably have a familiar ring. But as I think you'll see, some of the deep controversy and that Hamilton inspired in his life and after is not fully captured, I think, by the musical. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions. Okay. So Alexander Hamilton, and of course, here we have the musical. For those you haven't seen, Lin-Manuel Miranda up on the right, and Lin-Manuel with the other three leading casts down below. So as you'll know from the musical, Hamilton was he was born on the island of Nevis in the British West Indies in 1757, we think. Sometimes his birth date is given as 55, but we now think more likely he was born in 1757. His parents were not married. His mother, Rachel Fawcett Levine, was separated, estranged from her husband, and took up with a merchant by the name of James Hamilton. And they had two children, Alexander Hamilton's older brother, James Hamilton Jr., and Alexander, and they moved with their two sons to St. Croix, which is a Danish island also in the West Indies, in 1765. So the father deserted the family in 1766. and Hamilton's mother died of yellow fever in 1768, at which point he and his brother were separated. Alexander was adopted by a Nevis merchant named Thomas Stevens. So a very hard scrabble existence. He's orphaned at a young age. I would say that one of the things Hamilton, the musical, plays up the fact that Hamilton was an immigrant. In growing in New York and in his career in the United States, his poverty and illegitimacy was much more of an issue in his life. Early on, Hamilton distinguished himself as brilliant. Before his mother's death in 1768, this would be when he was 11, we think, he was hired as a clerk by the New York by a New York merchant firm based in St. Croix by the name of Kruger and Beekman. And Kruger and Beekman are both big New York merchants. And he was soon basically running the business, a very gifted businessman, a very fine mind. He's also early on distinguishes himself as a great writer. And the event that really launched Hamilton's public career in the United States was a hurricane that struck the West Indies in 1772, a horrifically destructive one. This is a watercolor. It's not a great image on the PowerPoint, but painted by the English watercolorist Thomas Hearne of the effects produced by the hurricane on nearby island of Antigua. Hamilton wrote a description of that hurricane in a letter that he sent it to the Danish governor. It was reprinted, widely circulated, describing the hurricane. And here you get just a taste of how he was writing at the tender age of, 15 when he wrote this. It's impossible for me to describe or you to form any idea of it, the hurricane. And then, of course, he proceeds to describe it: the roaring of the sea and wind, fiery meteors flying about it in the air, the